pursuits that you see on television all the time. We had a lot of pursuits, and a lot of those came out of the Boise Valley.
We see the world through narrative. People don't see through facts and figures and numbers. They see it through story and narrative.
Yeah, I believe that philosophy of, lead from the back or lead by being out front, doing it with them instead of telling them what to do. But today, these guys need to have backup. They need to have somebody at least coming their direction.
Hello, and welcome to the Brenton Peck podcast. Today's guest is Nick Schilz, a retired law enforcement officer with 37 years of service. Nick grew up in Mountain Home, Idaho, and spent much of his career serving the same community that raised him. He's a father of 4, grandfather to 9, and great-grandfather to 5. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brenton.
Yeah.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a while.
It has, yeah.
Yeah. I think last time I saw you, you were still police chief in Mountain Home.
Yeah, that was a couple years ago.
Yeah. I wanted to go back way earlier than that because I know you've been in law enforcement for a long time. So what first interested you about law enforcement?
Well, I actually got started working on the ambulance service. My wife and I at the time, Heath was born, he went into what was called a febrile convulsion. And we were living out on the farm, and it just scared us to death. And we got him into the hospital, and then after that, we decided if you're going to live out in the country, we should have a little background on what to do, because the farm life can be dangerous too. And so we both took EMT classes. Well, then I started working on the ambulance and getting associated with law enforcement officers when I was responding to accidents and different scenes and things. And shortly after that, I had a friend that invited me to become a special deputy where I could ride along and spend some hours with the actual deputies and, out doing patrol things with them. So that's how I actually got started.
That ride along, when you say, were you acting as a deputy as well, or was it more like support ride along so they have an EMT with you if something goes wrong? What does that mean?
Yeah, my EMT part was separate at that time. But I was deputized as a special deputy, so I was just extra hand and support for the deputy if we were out at a scene or at some kind of incident. Yeah, we were there primarily to support the deputy at the time, yeah.
Nice. I'm curious what being an EMT looked like. I would imagine there's a lot that's similar to today, but there may have been a lot that was different when you started, because medicine advances a lot.
Oh my gosh, it huge differences, because back in those days, they didn't have the technology and they didn't have all of the things that they can do on an ambulance service today. We just kind of packed them up and put them in the back and got them to the hospital as quickly as possible, taking care to protect the injury or protect the patient as much as possible. But we didn't have what they have today technology-wise. And so you threw a splint on a broken leg, or you started doing compressions, and you were on Zoom to the hospital and tried to get them to the ER as quickly as possible. Big difference where they might spend half an hour at the scene today with a paramedic and, actually do some diagnostic stuff and some meds and get a lot more done on scene than we ever did.
You were just get there as quick as possible and get them back to the hospital?
Yes, that's about right, yeah.
What did training for that look like?
Oh, we had quite a few hours of training. And even though we were only advanced EMTs for Mountain Home, you learned to drive defensively, but you also learned how to drive with a patient in the back. A lot of people don't realize the importance of driving somebody with an injury and they're hurt in the back and every little bump they feel. And so trying to be aware of that when you're driving. And then, learning how to do splints. And we learned how to do IVs and things like that. We could do a little bit of stuff like that. But the number of hours compared to what they do today, I think is probably only about a third or a fourth for what we had back in the late 70s.
Yeah. As you're talking about driving, what comes to mind is people who've driven with dogs in a vehicle versus someone who's never driven with a dog and seeing how the dogs move around.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you have to have your head on a swivel. You have to pay attention to the other drivers who aren't paying attention to you. Or those ones that suddenly they see the lights, and now they're panicked and hitting the brakes and things. But I was just telling my son-in-law this weekend, one of the ways that we learned how to drive was the instructor had us put a full glass of water between our legs and drive so that we wouldn't spill that water. And that simulated what the person in the back, the patient in the back, was going through. So each time you got wet, you accelerated too fast or slowed down too fast or took a corner too fast. And it seemed kind of silly at the time, and we all laughed and giggled, and we all got wet. But what a great learning experience to realize that person in the back, every little turn, every little bump, simulated, us getting wet. So we paid attention and tried to drive in their interest. And you still wanted to go quickly, but a little smoother.
Yeah. I had a couple of things that I did when I was learning to drive. Obviously nothing like that, but I would make a crock pot of chili and then drive with that, and you're not driving carefully. That's spilling all over your car and getting everywhere.
Sure. Yeah.
And I mentioned the dogs. There was another one, though. Oh, the other training that I really liked for awareness was going through motorcycle safety training and going through the STARS class and course. Like, a lot of drivers are taught, watch 3 seconds ahead. When you're on a motorcycle, it's watch 11 seconds ahead.
At least,
you're on a swivel everywhere. And I always felt like I was a safe driver anyways, but especially after the motorcycle training, my level of awareness was far higher. And I probably shouldn't have learned to ride where I did. I learned to ride in Phoenix.
Oh, wow.
And they say the average lifespan of a new rider in Phoenix is about 30 days. So I learned that after I started. It's like, that's a little scary. I'm glad that I'm okay.
And that you lived through it, yeah.
Yeah. But ironically, I felt safer riding in Arizona than I do in Idaho because everyone was aggressive in Arizona, but that also meant everybody was aware. Everybody drove the same. You could predict people a lot better. In Idaho, it's been the biggest mashup of different drivers I've ever experienced. And so I haven't felt safe to ride in Idaho.
That's kind of surprising. The roads don't seem to be as crowded, but I imagine what you're saying, they're more aware because that's the way they drive down there. So,
yeah.
Makes sense.
I mean, I never saw anybody on phones in Arizona. You see people on phones here all the time.
Oh, yes.
And
crazy.
You didn't see people really eating anything because everybody's hyper aggressive. One of the busiest roads in Arizona was Olive Avenue. And there was a section where it was only 2 lanes, one each direction. Speed limit was 45. And that road probably saw more traffic than our freeways do. But everybody would do 60 and a 45. Like, they just, traffic flew. But because of that, everybody stepped on it to get up to speed. But because of that, nobody was distracted. Nobody was on phones. Nobody was eating. Everybody had both hands on the wheel, very focused, paying attention. I saw far less accidents, ironically. Like, with that amount of traffic, I expected a lot more.
Sure, and I think you hit it on the head here in Idaho. We tend to allow ourselves to be distracted. The phones, the eating, the kids, the dogs, all those distractions that we have were probably in the bigger cities, especially when they grow up driving that way. Being able to drive out in the country and kind of do what you want, you allow yourself to be distracted, and then you go drive in a bigger city and you're not used to that attention span that you have to have because the cars are closer to you or they cut in front of you, whatever happens traffic-wise. But I can see what you're saying, sure.
Yeah. Well, after going back to the EMT, after you got deputized, where did you go after that? Did you do that for a while?
Yeah, so I was fireman at the time while I was working on the ambulance, and that was a volunteer service that we did for 4 years. And then while I was doing that, I also was a special deputy, and I was working at a tractor and implement dealership. And because I'd been riding with the deputies and got along with them well and interacted well, and I went pretty often, probably more often than I should have, but it worked out great for me, right? The chief deputy for the sheriff's office showed up at my work one day and said, "Hey, do you want to make more money than you're making now?" And what young person doesn't want to make more money? So, and I liked working with the deputies and I liked what they did. So I accepted the invitation, went in and talked to Sheriff Mendiola, and he hired me and sent me to Post Academy so I could get my certification and started my career.
Nice. Were you married at that point?
Yes, I was. Yep. And had kids already. And the kids took to it pretty well. They never did shy away from or seem to be, taken back by me being in law enforcement. In fact, they liked to ride along. We were allowed to take the kids to and from a little bit, not to anything intense, obviously, but yeah, I can say it now because it's all done, but they fed me information here and there, things they heard at school or heard from other friends and stuff, so we would pay attention to that. And they, of course, like to go to the accident scenes and go to the things with me, so nice. It was good. It was great to have them along.
Yeah. Were there a lot of challenges when you were deputized? Was that on kind of a regular schedule, or was that kind of any hours, all hours, wherever you wanted to fit it in?
Yeah, Elmore County, we were small enough that you were expected to be called out because they just didn't have enough manpower to cover everything. There were lots of weekends and night shifts where there would only be one deputy on. And Elmore County's 3,000 square miles. So there were times we'd get called out, and I became a detective fairly quickly. And of course, that all the felonies, we'd get called out for all the felonies and all the fatal accidents and stuff to help them do those investigations. So yes, I was called out often. There are a lot of Thanksgivings and Christmases, and especially as a detective, because we tried to give the road deputies a break somehow. So the detective usually pulled day shift on holidays. So that was just a trade-off.
Yeah. What kind of impact did that have on the family other than just not being there for some holidays or
Well,
nights?
I think we tried to spend quality time when I wasn't at work, so I tried to do the things with them. Heath was big into sports at that time, and all three of the girls were big into dancing, so tried to go to all their events, all the dance competitions and those things. So I think the trade-off was they understood it's part of my job, but they also understood if I could make it, I was going to be there for their event, whatever it was, too. So
yeah, I think the closest thing I have to liken to is Dad's military career, where it's like it's part of his job. Sometimes he got stationed elsewhere or gone for 3 months, but I didn't have much of the, on call at a moment's notice disappear, other than when they had, I don't know what you call it, but annual drills or something, or inspections or something like that. But I can kind of picture some of the same feelings.
yeah, the kids never said anything negative about me having to leave a birthday party or a Thanksgiving or Christmas situation. So as far as our relationship, that seemed to flow well, and they seemed to be pretty understanding. And like I said, they they never balked at my career. They never came home and said, oh, I'm getting teased, or somebody doesn't like you being in law enforcement, or doesn't like you for that matter. And so the kids seemed to adjust pretty well, and that made it easier for me, because I know there are scenarios out there where kids and families have had to deal with the negative part of law enforcement, especially today. It's quite different today than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah. I think we had a lot more respect for law enforcement 30 years ago. Felt like even when I was a kid, 20 years ago, there was a lot more. It feels we've kind of gone through phases where it seems like we have a lot of support for law enforcement, and then people get upset and it dips, and then it comes back up. It seems to just go in waves to me.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that, Brenton. And I think a lot of that comes from influential people that have some kind of authority above us. When they talk negative about law enforcement, that tends to go downhill to the rest of the public. And when I was in law enforcement and patrol as a deputy, I was on patrol at night or weekends by myself. But because of that respect you mentioned, I would go to a fight or go to a call by myself, and I wasn't worried about it because there was enough respect. I didn't feel threatened, and I could arrest somebody on my own. But today, these guys need to have backup. They need to have somebody at least coming their direction, because you just never know. The respect's not there, and it can go south really quick for these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious what kind of things you would interact with. I mean, there's the obvious, but like, did you run into repeat call outs to the same place, like maybe a domestic?
Yeah. Yeah, you have those, and domestics as an example. If that couple is struggling in their relationship, or if there's drugs or alcohol involved, then we would get called back fairly often. And that being said, I do recall an incident where several deputies, including myself, had been to this couple's house numerous times, and we had arrested one or the other, depending on which story seemed to be the most serious about what one did or the other one did to the other person in the relationship. Well, one night, it was pretty bad, and it had gotten pretty violent with each other, and so I arrested both of them, and they both went to jail for domestic abuse, and the judge gave the judge the opportunity to hammer them a little bit harder, and that seemed to make an impact, because I don't remember getting called back there after that, but yeah, we ended up arresting both the husband and the wife that night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of people view law enforcement, especially today, where it's just like, oh, you're just out to arrest or give a ticket or something like that. But there's a whole nother side, especially supporting and caring for people. Like, what did you get to do in that vein?
Oh, there's tons of things officers do that people just don't hear about. For one, most of the officers that I was associated with were pretty humble, and they weren't about bragging or getting the attention, So as an example, I know of officers that bought meals for people or paid for gas for people or a hotel room on their own, because the situation was such that it was just something they wanted to do, and they did it. But they didn't go bragging, and they didn't go, and the news doesn't want to cover that, because that doesn't get any traction. There's no drama behind that. So those kind of things happen. The JCs over in Mountain Home had a program where they delivered Thanksgiving meals to needy people, and law enforcement got to actually deliver those. And I thought that was a great partnership, because the JCs did all the fundraising and gathered all the products that went out to these needy families, but then it was law enforcement that got to interact with them besides the JCs. So we got to see some of the poorer kids or the kids in need, and interact with the families and stuff. And it was a great opportunity to show a better side of law enforcement instead of just hauling somebody to jail.
Yeah. I know you were a rescue diver at one point, but even before getting there, going back to the EMT side, what did you do in that vein? Like being able to help save people once you became deputized and went more that route, were you able to do use some of that medical training still?
Well, the medical part for the rescue diving didn't ever get to come into play. In Elmore County, all the diving myself and my partner Dana did was all recovery. So when we had have to go recover numerous bodies that had drowned, but we never actually got to pull somebody out diving and rescue them. It was always a recovery.
I would imagine to rescue and save, you'd have to practically be on scene. By the time you could drive out and get there, it might be too late.
Yeah, you can. Under certain circumstances, the water's got to be really, really cold, and the victim has to have certain things happen in order to be able to get them back out and do CPR and bring them back. But it is possible. We just didn't have that opportunity. I did get to have a save, though. As a deputy, there was a pickup traveling on Highway 30 by the 12th Street crossing over there, and it hit two girls that were walking alongside the highway, and the pickup rolled over, and it pinned the one girl, pinned her arm underneath the cab of the pickup. Well, when I arrived on scene, there was another deputy there already attending to the girl and the driver of the pickup, and I saw another girl floating face down in the canal. So I ran down the bank and jumped in and pulled her out and started doing CPR. And luckily for me, just as I started doing CPR, my brother-in-law pulled up. He was a teacher at the time, and he started doing CPR. Well, I ran back and grabbed the ambulance and told the ambulance crew, hey, I'm going to take this girl to the hospital. I'll be right back. And she ended up living, and she did very well after that. So
Nice.
yeah, that was one of the highlights.
Yeah. I think it's always good when you get the positive side and get to share that and not
Sure.
have it feel so negative.
Yeah, there was plenty of times where you did CPR and they didn't make it. And so, yeah, to have one actually be saved, that was a good thing.
Yeah. My familiarity with mental health support extends to just what you've seen on TV shows like NCIS or different things like that. So, how did you handle mental health? Because I'm sure losing people had an impact on you, or even having to make arrests, anything like that can all take a toll on you. How did you manage all that?
You know, I think that's different for everybody, Brenton. Personally, my faith helped me. I felt and always felt like I was there for a purpose and there for a calling, and so I could leave it at work. There were some things that occurred and happened that lingered still linger a little bit today, but for the most part, those kind of things I just chalked up to being part of the job. I was there to do the best I could do, and then I felt like, well, if I did the best I did, then that's good enough for today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, on that assumption a lot of people have that being a police officer is you're just out to get people. I have the opposite impression where most police officers I've known or any law enforcement go in wanting to help, wanting to do good. They don't want to have to arrest someone. So I would imagine every time you see difficult situations like that, even if you're able to leave it, that I would imagine that still tugged at your heart a little bit or affected you, even if it was just in the moment and then you could leave it, afterwards.
Yeah, there are numerous calls that we went on. We had a deputy die in an accident one night, and we had to go tell his wife and his family. And, Sheriff Lair and I did all the death notifications in Elmore County for many, many years. And because I did grow up there, I knew a lot of those people. So I had friends tell me, don't ever come to my door in your uniform. Make sure you call me, because they knew if I was coming, it was going to be bad news. So, but yeah, those kind of things. Growing up there, I didn't know everybody, but I knew a lot of people. So that made it difficult for things like death notification. But on the other hand, I grew up there and I had a rapport with a lot of people, and I could just talk to them. And, I am here to help. And sounds like a cliche a lot of times, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Well, we really were there to help. And I think Sheriff Mendel and Sheriff Olson and then Sheriff Lark continued that, be there to help first. Because the truth of the matter is, down the road, they can go to jail. You can arrest them, but do what you can to help first. And if educating them about drugs or educating them about DUI or even about speed can save them or make a difference in their lives, then do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I may have gotten this from martial arts, but, and I'm going to butcher the phrase, but it's something like the path that requires the least force. So if you can enable someone and give them those resources or help them to make better choices or not make choices that are going to land them up in jail, then you don't have to go down that path of force or anything.
Yeah, and I believe that. I tried to get officers to understand that philosophy. We would do training and talk to them about exactly that. One of the examples that I gave when I was talking to young officers is an example. We're sitting in the classroom setting and I'm just talking, and then I would have like a tennis ball or something, and who's the biggest, who's the baddest, who makes the most arrest, and kind of hype that up a little bit. And we're talking about, how do you talk to people? Do you have to be the tough guy all the time, or can you be nice? Well, some people believe you need to be tough all the time. You shouldn't be nice, because if you give them a ticket and you're too nice, they complain, believe it or not. But my theory was, you can turn that switch just as quick as you can react to me throwing a tennis ball at them, which I would do in class. So let's talk nice. I throw the tennis ball. They'd catch her to move out of the way. Now you can take them to the ground, or now you can make the arrest, or it's that quick. It's that easy. It's a choice that you make. So let's start off nice. And if you got to go to the ground later, then so be it.
Yeah.
That's their choice.
Yeah. There's the old meme of, better a farmer in a war better a warrior on a farm than a farmer in a war. And it's like, you have to have that capacity for the aggression, but that's last resort. You don't want to have to use that. But
that's where your training comes in. Those kind of things, certain moves and certain things that we did in order to get compliance needs to be second nature to an officer. He needs to be able to do that without thinking about, what am I going to do, or what needs to happen next. The circumstance would dictate, whatever compliance was appropriate, path of least resistance. But the more training and the more the officers were comfortable with that, it just came naturally. But you're exactly right. Yeah.
What did training look like? I'm mostly familiar with like martial arts. Did you guys have martial arts training like jiu-jitsu or?
That I don't know that the Post Academy does an actual jiu-jitsu classes now, but they incorporate some of that kind of stuff, arm bar holds and pressure compliance stuff, so that you don't have to hurt somebody or break an arm, but get their attention, so that they are willing to just go the easy route, right?
Yeah.
And then the tasers and the mace, those kind of things. Our departments highly encourage you, if you were going to wear a taser, to be tased, so that you understood that once you pull that trigger, what the person on the other end's going through. Same thing with mace. If you're going to mace somebody, you should know what that's like to be maced. So we highly encouraged our officers to go through that training so they'd understand.
Yeah. One of my best friends, he wasn't in the police, but he worked at Department of Corrections, and they had that same thing with mace, where part of your initial onboarding training is you had to take some mace and understand what that feels like.
Yeah. Unintentionally or not knowing, we had treated a granary that had weevils in it. When I was working on the farm, we had a granary full of wheat, and it got weevils in it. So we treated with, I didn't know what it was, but it actually was some kind of a tear gas thing. And I was in there shoveling that stuff, and boy, my eyes were burning, my nose and everything. And so I actually got exposed to it before I ever got in law enforcement. So I knew you could work through it and fight through it. Just concentrate on what you're doing. Same thing with the mace training. And, you have to understand you can get through this. Yes, it burns. Yes, your eyes water and it's hard to breathe, but you can still function.
Yeah.
Mindset.
Yeah. I'm curious on some of the mindset training, like you see on TV shows. So I don't know what's real, what's not, but like they would get maced, but then still have to handle an aggressive situation and be able to restrain someone or different things like that, to not just so that you can do it, but practice it so it's muscle memory and that's your default response.
Yeah, I don't know very many people that go through the mace or the taser training very often. Maybe there are some departments out there that require it more often, but once you've been maced or tased, you pretty much remember that. So, and the whole idea in our training was to function. You had to kind of fight with somebody or fight with a dummy and then put it on the ground, or then drag it while all this mace is affecting you, and then actually handcuff somebody. So get your handcuffs out, be able to function with those. So some of what I've seen on TV seems like an awfully cleaned up version, because you're got snot running everywhere and your eyes are watering so bad, and you're trying to see, but you can do it.
Yeah. I would imagine you can only relate so much through like a TV show compared to what it would actually be experiencing it.
Yeah, I've only seen a couple things where people get tased and supposedly can fight through a taser. I've never seen that in person. I'd be shocked if somebody could fight through a taser. I don't think it's possible. Every
to me,
muscle
if they're
in your
fighting
body.
through it,
Yeah.
if they're fighting through it, to me that says one of the leads didn't actually connect.
Now that's possible. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we hook the leads down by their ankle and have another one up by their shoulder or something, so it's not like a direct full body thing, but I guess that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back, so you were deputized and then you became, were you a patrol officer first before becoming a detective?
Yes. Yeah. I did patrol and then became a detective, and there was only one detective at that time, and we had, like I said, we did all of the burglaries, all of the home invasion, all the felony robbery stuff, did all that. Got a lot of experience as a detective. One of the things I will say about smaller communities, smaller towns, is we dealt with everything you hear of in a big city, just not as much or as often. So we had homicides, and we had bank robberies, and we had drug dealers and all that stuff, just not on the same scale. In fact, Sheriff Lair and I, one of the drug investigations we did, we were buying crack cocaine from an individual in Mountain Home. And when we took the product that we purchased undercover to the lab to have it tested, the lab techs told us we were the first agency in Idaho to actually make an undercover purchase of crack cocaine.
Goodness.
Little old Elmore County.
I'm curious because Mountain Home Air Force Base is right there too. So Mountain Home's kind of unique in that you have a huge population that's kind of always been there and it's generational, and then you have another huge population that it's constantly rotating out with the military. How did that affect some of the law enforcement, whether working with MPs on the base or just a difference of people coming through?
Yeah, the difference in today's military, the last 7 years that I witnessed versus going back 30 years ago, the young airmen would go downtown and there'd be fights and there'd be situations not good for those individuals or good for their careers. But we had an excellent working relationship with OSI and the military police. Military police couldn't actually do as much hands-on, obviously, outside of the base because of all of their rules. But OSI, when we were doing active investigations, they could get clearance and come out and actually work drug deals with us. And especially when we could show a connection that this dealer is selling to military people. So we worked hand in hand with OSI back in those days and did a lot of cases with them.
Nice. I'm curious, let's say someone committed a crime off base, something they would go to jail for. Would they have gone to jail like there, or were they turned over more to military and then the military went through disciplinary action? Like how was that handled?
So the initial arrest would have been they'd have gone to the local jail. But we did have a relationship where if we knew the individual was military, we would contact either the security forces or OSI and give them a heads up, hey, your guy's in jail and this is what he did. And then sometimes the prosecutor would work with the base knowing that it was going to be dealt with out there. And so they would work out some kind of a deal with them.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious how the jurisdiction worked with that. How was jurisdictions working with whether it was Boise or other places? Did you get to work like with the FBI or anybody beyond just local?
Yeah, I can say that the FBI and Marshal Service, the state police, we worked a lot with the state police because some of those bigger homicide cases, the triple homicide that we had, that was beyond our means as far as being able to do a lot of the lab work and those things. So we could call them and they would send a whole team down to kind of assist us and help us with follow. It was still our case. They didn't take it away from us, but we were able to work hand in hand with them. Bank robbery things, the FBI was involved in those, but we got to work with them. I don't know if it's because we were local and they let us, but we always had a good relationship with them. And then down the road, we got to have a good relationship with the U.S. Marshal's office because when Elmore County built that jail, we signed contracts and housed marshals, the U.S. Marshals prisoners. So we had a good rapport with them as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Most of what I know goes back to just what you've seen on TV, and everything's made for drama. So it's always interdepartmental conflict and no, it's my case. No, it's our case. And seems like they always depict nothing but issues.
Yeah, I think there may have been a few little personal things here and there, but 99% of the time, our relationship with the city, the state, the base, all was really excellent, really good. Yeah.
Nice. Being that you kind of did the part-time deputized work, I'm curious if people from other law enforcement agencies could do something like that. Like if you had an MP on base that could also come out and be deputized in Elmore County or something like that. Did you ever have people working multiple?
Yeah, the MPs, not so much because of the rules. I don't remember what that statute is that doesn't allow them to do things. Seems like back way long time ago, Brenton, we were able to do traffic lanes where we check driver's license and insurances in between the base and Mountain Home, and we would have MPs standing by. They couldn't participate, but for the most part, they weren't allowed to do that just because of the rules that they had. Now OSI, like I said, if we could show a connection to the base, they were allowed to work with us.
Nice. Well, I'm curious, what are things that you got to do that nobody would have ever assumed that was most enjoyable to you? Like, what was your favorite part on two parts, like when you were just the ride-along, like deputized, but also as a patrol officer and then as a detective?
Yeah, so again, like I said, just because we were a little county didn't mean we didn't do some of those big things. Pursuits that you see on television all the time, we had a lot of pursuits, and a lot of those came out of the Boise Valley, people that were drunk, and an officer would get them behind them, and then they decide to take off, and next thing you know, they're headed toward Elmore County. Well, the dispatchers would talk to each other. We'd send deputies out to meet them on the interstate, and then because they're out of the jurisdiction, we would take over the pursuit at that time and try to safely end the pursuit and get those people arrested. Some of those were crazy, Brenton. Some of the DUIs that came out of the Boise Valley, well over 100 miles an hour. We had people driving on the wrong side of the interstate. One guy, I specifically remember, he had crossed over on the wrong side of the interstate and then turned his lights off, going the wrong way. So that particular night, I was able to get my vehicle out in front of him, and I was flashing my headlights and had my top lights on and trying to get people. Obviously, it turned out okay. We didn't have a crash or anything, but yeah, we didn't get that guy stopped until almost down by Hammett.
Goodness.
Yeah, so a lot of miles of going the wrong way on the interstate.
Yeah. I would have never thought of high-speed chases in Elmore County.
Yeah. Couple in the city where they just wouldn't stop, and they just kept going block after block and around the block and down the alleys, and yeah, crazy.
I'm curious also how the police interface with like the city or planning for traffic. As an example, by our martial arts studio, there's two roads that are offset really weird, where you have one on the right, instead of being at an exact cross, there's one that comes in to the main road just before, and then another that's just off to the left to the right. So people go into that turn lane, and there's almost an accident a day there. So I'm curious how, like, you interface with the city. Do you have impact, or did you have impact on planning, or does this intersection need a light or things like that?
Yeah, we did. We were invited to those meetings, myself and the fire department. I specifically don't remember ambulance, but they may have been involved. But myself and the fire chief would go or send a representative and look at their plans and talk about the things that would cause concern for us, visibility and impacts, traffic numbers, those kind of things we gave input on, and fire chief would talk about his concerns as well. So that came pretty early in the planning stages. In case there was something that needed to be addressed, they could do it before they had invested too much, and then they could make the investment.
We've been writing the mayor and transportation department and trying to get a light in at that intersection, and because you can see from the dojo an accident almost every single day. Summer fender benders, we've seen jaws of life used a couple times. There's been a lot of accidents.
And it's a city street?
Yep.
Yeah, so my recommendation to you, I'm not going against your city guys, but have them pull the numbers and how many injuries and how many accidents occur. because it's a liability to the city if they're ignoring it. And maybe they are trying to address it, and everything has a price tag and costs money. You can't just go put one up, but they do traffic counts, they can go back. IDT keeps track of all of those accidents, and they can go back and tell you what time of day they happened, how serious it was, how often. So, yeah, it can be
Ask them
done.
to pull the numbers and review it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's all about money, unfortunately. They have to find the funds to put those things up.
Yeah. They're getting ready to do another project just down the street to put in a giant roundabout. And that one will be interesting because that's the main thoroughfare for some semi-trucks. But yeah, we thought the one where all the accidents happened was a little more important than the roundabout. But, I have limited knowledge. I don't have insight into all the planning.
Yeah, I don't know what avenues you've gone through yet, but City Hall, council meetings, the City Highway Department, if you can meet with their director and their safety people. We had a safety team in Mountain Home that kind of did that, and they would make reports. There's been so many complaints about kids crossing these streets and not being visible, and they would report that to us. And so when appropriate, we made adjustments. So I don't know if Nampa has a safety team or not, but you might check on that.
Yeah, I'll have to check in. I don't know offhand. Well, going back to working with the sheriff's department and the rescue diver, I know you went on to then become police chief in Mountain Home. What inspired the transition from the sheriff department to the police department?
Well, that was crazy. I was actually in the process of getting ready to retire from the sheriff's office after 30 years, and Sheriff Lair and I were invited to go meet some of the candidates for the police chief job. They were in the process of switching to a new chief, and we sat down with Mayor Rist just visiting, and Sheriff Lair said, "Well, you should interview Nick." And Mayor Rist turned to me immediately and said, "Would you be interested?" I said, "Well, I'll talk to you about it." And he said, "Be in my office tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. And that's how it started. Sheriff was kind of joking, but I was going to retire from the sheriff's office anyway. And Mayor Rist and I got along great. It was an awesome relationship as far as him being a boss and allowing us to do our job. So, yeah, that was the start of how I got started being police chief. Sat down just visiting.
Nice. What are the job differences? Like, what does being police chief entail? I think most people are more familiar with like a patrol officer, maybe less familiar with a detective, but I don't think many people have any understanding more of the leadership roles.
The police chief role really is more administrative. I would try to go out with the guys, especially in the very beginning, to get to know them and let them know, hey, I don't mind getting my hands dirty. If you guys are out here, I'll be out here if you want me to. Don't hesitate to call me. But there's a lot more administrative things as further up the chain you go that you got to address, personnel matters, budget matters, those kind of things. So a lot of my time changed from being able to do field work to attending to the administrative things.
I would imagine you had some level of input or direction on ongoing training or different programs. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so we required a certain number of ongoing training, and the courts kind of drove that, because if you didn't have ongoing training, the defense attorneys would bring that up and talk about that during cases. And so there are certain things that had to be annual or every couple years, and then we would try to even do more. Again, getting back to, you want that to be in second nature in the officer's mind, that when it comes down to that, he's comfortable, he can just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a high priority for us. Training is expensive, but more than worth it for everybody you deal with. Traffic accidents, when you can teach them how to drive quickly but safely, you spend a lot of money sending them to those kind of courses. And even the motorcycles, Little Old Mountain Home had a couple of motorcycles, so we would send our officers to those courses, teach them how to ride and do all that stuff. So
Nice.
it was good.
What about different things? Like, did you guys do like leadership classes or different things like that you wouldn't normally think of specific to police?
I personally did. I invited guests in, and it didn't make it mandatory, but anybody that wanted to come to these specific talks in the evening, we would provide a meal, and we'd have a speaker that would talk about relationship. We'd talk about, because law enforcement is hard on relationships, marriages. They're one of the highest divorce rates, unfortunately, in the professional system. But so we'd bring in people to talk about that and talk about, if not relationship, talk about training. And so we would offer outside things to build that camaraderie and build that understanding and leadership. And one of the things was my goal when I came in under Mayor Rist was I wanted to have people prepared to just fill my shoes when I left, so he wouldn't have to hire out of, our department. He would have the confidence in the people that were in the department because they were doing it side by side with me, and hopefully they liked what I did.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I sent officers to as much administrative training as possible so that they'd be prepared. And then our insurance company, iCrimp, required certain things like sexual harassment training and documentation training and all those things. So those things were required of anybody that was in administration as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My dad did something similar when he was in the military, where he would take the young airmen and say, "You're my rank along with me for the day." Can't literally give them that rank, but you're going to walk along beside me and see everything I do, and kind of mentor and let them experience that. Because you get a lot of young guys or newer guys that's like, you don't look like you're doing anything. It's like there's a whole lot more to administration and leadership than it appears on the surface.
Well, I think that goes two ways. If you can do that with the people below you, one, it shows that you're willing, right? And the other thing is it gives them an understanding what it's like to deal with the administrative side of it. Because if you only do the field work and you don't know what the paperwork side of what you just did at the top affects, the department, then so we invited, all of my sergeants were required to come to a meeting at least once or twice a year and participate in command staff meetings. And that's not what they wanted to do, but when we'd bring them in and have to talk budget or we have to talk personnel issues, and I even went as far as to stick my neck out and say, we have to talk about a personnel matter. Now, I'm brought you in as command staff today. You're part of command staff. So you can't go back out and just start talking about this. And we talk about the issue, even though it involved personnel. So they'd get a taste of, oh, crap, we just spent 3 hours talking about one little incident. It eats up a lot of time when you're dealing with, personnel matters and especially discipline matters. So we didn't take those lightly. Discipline was a big deal, and you want to do it right. I always insisted get the other side of the story. Don't ever take a complaint and just run with it. I want to know both sides of the story.
Yeah.
So you invite those patrol people in or those sergeants in, and they go, "Gee, I didn't know you're going to spend 3 hours on it." That's just the beginning. We still got more to do.
Yeah, and I like
that's what your dad did.
Yeah, I liked what you said too. On the flip side, you had made reference earlier. You'd go right along with them or spend time out in the field. That was something Dad kind of taught me as well. Was like good leaders don't ask those under them to do anything they wouldn't be willing to do themselves.
Right.
And so, early on, I was a shift manager at Wendy's, and was kind of my management style. I would go in and first with all the employees, I'm going to go in and I'm going to work the station with you, whatever it was. And so you're going to see, I know what I'm doing. I've experienced it. B, that I'm willing to get in and do it. There was a little while where I got moved around from store to store to store because I was kind of the cleanup guy. So they'd move me from one store. Okay, you're going to clean this store up, get it, so it looks polished and neat and clean again. And, they had other people that they had tried doing that with, and they would go in and just tell, okay, you're cleaning this, you're doing this. My general approach is I went in, I cleaned it up. Okay, now come over. I'm going to teach you how to maintain it. But I did the hard work, and I'll show you, I know the hard work of maintaining it too. And then I entrust you to take care of that. But I always started with that. You're going to see me do the hard work before I ask you to do it.
Yeah, I believe that philosophy of, lead from the back or lead by being out front and doing it with them instead of telling them what to do. I think that's the best way to be a leader. I saw some chiefs and some sheriffs that you'll do it because I said so. There are circumstances where that's appropriate, but a lot of times your people will follow and give you 100% if you're right there shoulder to shoulder with them versus because you're barking at them and you have a better badge on or bigger badge on. I didn't believe it that way.
Yeah.
I wanted to be there and show them I knew how, and I did it. That's another thing, I suppose, that did help me because I grew up there and I had such a long career in the sheriff's office. All of the people in the city knew what I did and how long I did it and had done everything. So I didn't have to prove anything to them. They knew,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to take a little bit of a step back as well, because you referenced again, law enforcement is one of the hardest on marriages. How did that affect you? How were you able to get through that in different areas?
Yes. I ended up divorced twice. And the first time, my first wife, Becky, we had 4 kids, and I was just gone a lot. At that time, I was detective and doing drug work when I wasn't in the office doing reports and stuff, and was out nights, out weekends. And I just gone, and poor Becky was left to deal with the kids. I would be there when I could, but then you get the call out or you get the whatever. And so other people talked about it being, well, you get this adrenaline thing from being at work, and then you get home and you get that letdown. I never saw it that way, and I didn't feel I ever had to be back at work, but I quite often got called back to work. And so the hours away caused, issues between the relationship that got difficult to deal with. And so unfortunately, I didn't have enough experience in life to know there were other avenues to deal with it. And so we chose to get divorced. But a lot of law enforcement officers get divorced just because of the hours and the shifts and the things you deal with. You mentioned earlier things that get in your head and the things that you can't unsee, or you come home grumpy, and it's not the wife's fault because you had to deal with somebody on arrest that was just a total jerk, or, you had that child die and now you're depressed, and it's not the wife or the family's fault, but it's hard for you to deal with because it's real. You're going through that. And so those kind of things affect the family, even though you may have been the one to deal with it. I know military families deal with that often as well. They get sent out to do their job and come back and have to deal with a whole different scenario at home.
Yeah. Is there a lot of resources to help with that, whether mental health support or, even maybe just mentoring from a more, I don't know if I want to say more senior, but maybe someone who's experienced similar things and already walked through those scenarios?
There are a lot of resources. In my career, unfortunately, a lot of egos came into play and they did not want to participate. After action scenarios where ambulance crews or officers could get together and talk about what they saw, what they dealt with, what do you need, how are you feeling, try to avoid the depression that came with some of those deaths, and especially when I dealt with children, But also, unfortunately, a lot of officers' egos were, I don't need that, And so we made sure our sergeants and lieutenants were aware that who was at what scenario and keep an eye on him for the next week or two. If he starts getting complacent or starts seeing a different reaction in him, then we would pull him in and talk to him a little more depth. But there were resources available. Just not very often did they take us up on.
I think that's typical in any field. People, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink type thing. Like, it's so many people have, for any number of reasons, not wanting to do things. A lot of people view like mental health as, well, that says something negative about me.
Yeah. Weak.
Yeah, weak. You want to put on that, I don't want to say macho because that sounds like I'm limiting to just men and it affects everyone, but that very strong exterior. If I do this at all, then, if I have to go into a situation, they know I went through something. Are they going to try to exploit that? Or I can see fear in that aspect. I can see time, like, you had a lot on your plate. Here's one more thing I have to go do.
That's a really good point there too, because a lot of law enforcement agencies can't pay very well. So when you're dealing with the stress of situations at work, and most of us these days, the spouses have to work as well in order to have a nice living. And so then you're juggling kids, juggling schedules, juggling how often you get to see each other. And then that macho thing kicks in and, well, I'm not asking for help or we're not going to counseling or unfortunately that's real. But you try to get the people that are up above and have the experience to watch for the younger guys and talk with them. And sometimes that was the best way. You get a sergeant sitting in with a rookie in the car and talking about his experience and talking about what he did. Sometimes that was the best thing. You could hear it from somebody you trusted.
Yeah. I bet there's another layer here too, kind of building on the time thing. We were in Ontario for a little while, and I believe they had to do away with their gang task force because the city just didn't have enough revenue. But Ontario was one of the highest crime places in the highest crime counties in the state of Oregon. So they had a lot of stuff, but I worked with advertising for the newspaper there. And so I interacted with the mayor and other people regularly. And one of the challenges, people didn't realize, because that's a bottleneck for going from the coast to get into Idaho. Mm-hmm. The actual population, I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say the population of citizens of Ontario might have been 10,000. But the population during the day of people that came in for jobs and other stuff was more like 60,000.
Oh, wow.
So they had such a drastic increase in people, but then they're having to reduce their police force. And that brings me to wondering, where you were filling in, when you were deputized, well, if you're shorthanded, you may not have time maybe to step away to recover mentally from something. You might be called right back into something else because things keep happening. Like, did you ever see anything like that where just because I would imagine that impacts smaller towns, but then even when you get to big towns, I mean, everything is balancing money. You want to trim down to the minimal necessary if you view it as a business, which, I mean, from the city, they're going to view in some ways that as a business. What are the trade-offs? So
It and balancing that budget part versus the people part.
I imagine that's
That because the people that excuse me can actually hand out the money didn't necessarily have the experience, and so getting them to understand the importance that was sometimes a challenge. You had to be kind of inventive. I remember as a deputy, one of the county commissioners was wanting us to go to mid-size or small cars. Excuse me. Wow. Because it'd be more economical and better fuel mileage. And when you're traveling 100 miles an hour to get to a scenario, you didn't want to be in a little small, lightweight car. And so he wasn't getting it, and so I made it personal for him, and I ran the scenario by him that your wife is being raped right now and your kids are being held downstairs in the basement right now. Do you want me to drive this little 4-cylinder to get there? Do you want me to drive something and get there quickly and safely? And that seemed to open his eyes a little bit. So we got bigger, better cars that year.
Yeah. I think, how did I phrase this the other day? We see the world through narrative. People don't see through facts and figures and numbers. They see it through story and narrative. So if you can frame things in a story or narrative, even if you're saying the same exact thing, but frame it in terms of a narrative or story that speaks to that person, that tends to be the most effective. So it seems like a lot of the effective leaders I've seen know how to make that balance and make it personal, kind of like you did, where you're stating the exact importance that you were stating before, but you're stating it in a way he can understand.
Yeah, and I see that as maybe going to be one of your best challenges. You're going to need to learn how to read your people that you bring in, or learn about their background so that you know the right question and then listen to their answer. We had briefly spoke earlier. People are willing to talk if you give them the chance, but you need to listen to what they're saying and then pick up on little cues, little things. Same thing with my officers. They bring in a suspect and they want a confession, right? Well, give him a chance to confess. Quit asking him questions. He's talking to you, and now you've asked him his third and fourth and fifth question. He's not done answering the first one.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, communications, understanding, learning body language. The commissioner, that particular, he was a good guy, really good guy, and very concerned for the county and the city, but he had a budget to manage. And so, as I was trying to explain, we're going to be repairing these little itty-bitty cars way more often than if we just buy a bigger, better car, something that can run 100 miles an hour for, 80 miles versus a little itty-bitty car that's going to struggle with that. So I did make it personal that time, but sometimes you have to. It depends on the person.
Yeah. I'm definitely delving into learning different communication techniques and interviewing. One of the things I came across recently was if you want someone to tell you more, don't ask questions, make a statement. If you ask a question, people are quite often on guard and they put some defenses up or hesitancy. But if you make a statement, like instead of asking, was that hard, say, I bet that was hard. And then they either want to affirm what you're saying or challenge it. No, it really wasn't that hard. And here's why. Like they tend to give more information in making statements than asking questions. And that's something like I'm conscious of as I'm doing these podcasts is I've learned I ask a lot of questions, and I'm trying to reframe in my mind in real time. How do I turn this into a statement to open that door more?
Sure. No, that's a great example. Yeah. And just so far, what I'm hearing from you and the way you're coming back around to things, and shows me that you're listening, for one thing, and the topics and the way you're bringing them up shows that you have a concern. You're not just trying to get some airtime on here. So I think you're going to do well, Brenton. I think it's going really well for you.
I appreciate it. I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm always learning. I didn't have a guest this last episode. Actually, I had forgotten about scheduling because I had so much and just let it drop. But I highlighted a couple things in there, and that I want to focus on some of that communication and adding value. Like the entire premise of the podcast, kind of building off what you said about like mentoring someone who's been through something, mentoring and telling their story to the younger officers, is I build on the premise that stories matter and we learn through narrative. Quite often people can understand more what you're saying if you give them a story narrative than if you give a logical analysis of beliefs. We hear things in narrative. We gain hope through narrative. You can see that you're not alone. There's someone walking beside you. And so the whole premise or purpose of this is trying to pull some of those stories out. Like you said, you got to let people kind of breathe. First episode was with my mom, and I found I struggled with that one in some ways more because I knew the whole story.
Sure.
So part of it was like, stop getting antsy. It's not, I've heard this before. And I think I didn't let her breathe and talk enough on some of it. And then I've had other episodes. One of my guests, Gigi, phenomenal speaker. And I think that's the least I've ever talked on an episode. And it was 3 hours long.
Oh, wow.
Because she just was really good. So just put something there and let her run with it.
Great.
But,
and you learn to recognize strengths in people too. We had officers that were good storytellers, so you wanted those to be with young officers that could, tell the story, and yet others that weren't much for talking, but they knew their stuff. That was the guy you wanted to send into a hostage situation. He didn't want to talk about it, but he'd go get the job done.
yeah.
So you have those balances where you learn their strengths and use it to the department's advantage or to the employee's advantage.
On some of those strengths, did you guys do like personality assessments at all ever? Or was it just more kind of watching those around you and getting a sense of their personalities?
We didn't, as far as the testing goes. We had a pretty good system for testing. They had to do physical stuff, and they had to do actual paper tests, everything from English to math and whatnot. And then we did some pretty rigorous interviews. And in the interviews, we would spend time trying to figure out the personalities. And, it may seem silly, but we'd ask, questions like, you're in a school zone, the speed limit's 25. Are you going to write a ticket for somebody going 23 or 24? It's against the law. Black and white says you can. Are you going to write a ticket? I personally was looking for the person that would understand the circumstances, and maybe they deserved a ticket to learn, and you're going to teach that person at 24 miles an hour. Or maybe they would just talk to them and say, were you aware, next time you'll get a ticket? Because in a small town, chances are high you're going to see them again. So one warning maybe is all they needed to learn and educate them.
Yeah. My thought just went completely out the window. I had it there. What, with some of the mental health challenges, let's say PTSD as an example, a lot of people aren't aware, and I forget the exact term for it, that you can have I'll call it adjacent trauma, where you didn't actually go through it, but you feel some of the same effects from having watched someone go through it as though you had gone through it yourself. Were there challenges with that? And then I want to take it a little further with like an example. A lot of people experience secondhand or adjacent trauma with Charlie Kirk recently. Like they weren't actually at the event. They didn't know him, but maybe they saw what happened, and that caused some PTSD and trauma just from that. Did you see that, and how did you guys handle that, I guess?
Well, sometimes it was an advantage to have that happen because, in all fairness, it would show that maybe this wasn't the career for somebody, because the wide variety of things that we have to deal with in law enforcement. I mean, honestly, you have to know about finances, you have to know about religion, you have to know about counseling, you have to know about medicine, or at least something about those, because each scenario you got thrown into, you didn't know exactly what you're going to deal with. So you had to have a little bit of something, or at least be able to talk about it. And so I can recall a couple people that were hired, and you'd put them with an FTO, field training officer, and they're sharing and talking in the car and running scenarios by these people. What would you do? And this is what we did, what happened to us. And within, 6 weeks, some of those people decided, I don't think this job's for me. I thought it'd be great, and I thought it'd be all what I saw on TV, but realistically, when officers that are experienced are talking about, that death or that scenario, arresting somebody and having to fight them to the ground, they decide. So sometimes the PTSD discussions, the officer sharing what they went through, that secondhand thing was a good thing, because it showed us people that weren't ready for it and couldn't deal with it. The other side of that, I think, more or less, we tried to be aware, getting back to some of the things that we did for our department, is we invited families, we invited wives to come to training so that the wives would see what the officer's going through. And then we could hear from the wives, what do you need to have your husband come home whole as a husband? He's not just an officer at home too, he's not trying to run it that way. So I think that secondhand stuff you had to be aware of so that it didn't rub off on families.
Yeah. I'm somewhat thinking additionally in terms of community. Let's say, because we talked earlier, part of what you want to do is help people, not just go out and arrest. But let's say you do have to go out to a traumatic situation. Maybe someone has passed. You have probably more experience with dealing with trauma and stuff than, say, the families of that individual. How are you able to help or refer to help maybe the families or people adjacent that are experiencing some of that trauma?
Refer them to help?
Yeah.
Where to get help?
Yeah.
I think we were kind of blessed in that we had a good relationship with the people in Mountain Home that did work in that field, whether it was at the hospital or clinics or stuff, because we knew them on a first-name basis. And so if it was something we felt warranted, we would let them know, hey, you can reach out to this resource, go contact this gentleman or this nurse, and they can set you up or, hook you up with the right area. Or for that matter, we used a lot of religious stuff as well. We would ask them point blank, are you affiliated with a church or any particular organization? And, maybe you could reach out to them. A couple of times I reached out to the pastor and said, just so you know, one of your people is struggling. We dealt with them, and if you get the opportunity, So, the whole idea was to help, right?
Yeah.
So you look for those resources and those opportunities. Again, listen, what did they say? And maybe ask them a couple questions and get that information. Encourage them.
Yeah. A couple different episodes, I've brought up my view on community as one of the solutions to many problems. And that's whether it's, having a fellow officer you can talk to and share your story, or having a pastor you can go to, or whatever that community might be. That is one of the greatest helps, so that you're not going through something alone. One of the guys I just interviewed, his episode's not out yet, but I believe I'm airing it this week, is Mark Rennick. And he had spent 10 years in prison between California and Idaho. And he talked a lot about one of the things most people don't realize is all the people in prison in Idaho, for the most part, are coming back to the community at some point. And so I'm curious, were you able to interface in a positive manner with people maybe coming out of being incarcerated to help them plug back in or provide resources? Or did they just look at you guys with a negative light afterwards?
We dealt with a few people that threatened us, threatened our families, and thank goodness nothing ever came of that. But most of the people that we dealt with, Brenton, we treated like we would want to be treated, even though the scenario was they had to be or needed to be arrested. We still treated them with respect. And so that being said, I can honestly say numerous times I was confronted or met people that I had taken to prison or arrested, and they would come up to me and talk to me and say, "Hey, do you remember me?" I'm like, "No, not really." He said, "Well, you put me in prison 8 years ago, and probably the best thing that ever happened to me because now I'm straight." Or one guy was a drug dealer, and now he's a very successful businessman and more than willing to talk and share and stuff. So I think one of the keys was treat people the way you'd want to be treated, and they respected that. I had a job to do.
Yeah.
Our officers have a job to do, but treat them with respect. And they'll come back into the community, and almost all of them end up being successful and productive members in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that intriguing. To some degree, I had realized, for the most part, we don't hand out life sentences to anything. So I should say we hand out life sentences cautiously. It's not just for any infraction. And I don't know that we do many death sentences, or if we even do them in Idaho. So at some level, I think I realize these people are coming back, but I had never thought about it. And I think most people don't think about that. And a lot of people put a negative light as soon as you've been incarcerated or you've been in trouble with the law. They look down on you, don't treat you with respect. And so I was thinking about that as you were coming in, after having talked to Mark. Is that a common thing where the police are able, or law enforcement in general, able to interface with people coming out to provide I don't know if community is the right word, but compassion and respect and resources for them to reintegrate? Because, like you said, part of what you want to do is provide help, be there for people. And they're people too. They're going to reintegrate and interface. They need that community. And even an additional component on that, you don't want to have to go have a repeat offender. You don't want to have to go be in that situation again.
Right.
So I see several benefits of it.
I know of programs where agencies had something set up to interface with the individual that had been incarcerated. I didn't personally deal with any of those programs, but the individuals, when they came back, you said it perfectly. They're just people. They're human beings, and they have every right to, if they can become a productive member of society and our community. That's what we want, right? So we didn't treat them any different. We gave them that opportunity to be a better person. And that goes back to treating everybody the way you'd want to be treated.
Yeah.
And most of them have, very seldom was it somebody that didn't have family there. So they were coming back, whether it's immediate family, wives and kids, or, parents or something. And so you would deal with those people as well. You would see the father or the mom at the store next day or next week after arresting their child, and or spouse for that matter. So the whole thing seemed to flow fairly well for a small community like ours, because you were going to run into them. Well, treat them with respect.
Yeah.
Then you didn't, not that we didn't have some issues. We did occasionally, but for the most part, we didn't.
I can see things being a lot smoother in a small town than a big town, from that more personal connection. The thing that comes to mind is social media and phones. Everybody used to be more aware of their behavior and how they were impacting or could be impacted by other people. There was consequences to interaction. You didn't just go up and spout obscenities in someone's face because they might deck you.
Right.
But we've, in some ways, trained a lot of people online to act in ways they would never act in person. And I think some of that is spilling over into interpersonal interaction now. And I'm curious, your perspective on social media's influence on a lot of people's behavior.
Well, I'll tell you personally, I think it's horrible. I think it is something that has a huge negative effect these days. When you see this video posted on whatever media it is of a scenario going down and the person really needed help, whatever it was, and the person's more interested in videotaping it than actually giving assistance, we failed. Something's wrong when they don't have the compassion to jump in and help, and they want their, whatever it happens to be, 15 seconds of glory because they got this posted. I think it's horrible. Or another scenario is an officer makes a traffic stop and he's willing to give them a warning. Now, all they want to do is get the officer on their camera, on their video, right? And they keep agitating the officer, not doing what the officer says, not following what the instructions are. All they're doing is just videotaping it. I think it's wrong. Go back to being respectful. And if you don't like the way you were treated or the officer wasn't professional, then handle it through the appropriate measures. Don't just videotape it and post it out there, because sometimes those things, through editing and whatnot, get all kinds of skewed and messed up. So
yeah, I'm curious some of your insights. Having worked as a law enforcement officer, but then also just having been around a lot of people, you've had a lot of insight into people's behavior patterns. And over time, I'm curious what you see has changed beyond just people being less respectful as a consequence of social media. One of the things I've seen is people, when they're forging relationships, aren't forging the same depth of relationship. It seems a lot more shallow to me, because it used to be, 50 years ago, you would write someone a long, elegant letter and take time to think through what you were going to say. And now we send a quick 2-second text that we don't even bother to spell check.
Well, you're sitting in the same room texting each other. The letter thing, you're exactly right. Same opinion. Back then, you put some thought into it and you put it in writing, and you may even rewrite it before you actually put it in the mailbox. Now they text this stuff real quick and hit send and didn't even proofread it really, or said something they shouldn't have said because they didn't take the time to go through it. So I think it's a problem. I think it has diminished the relationship side of things. I think it's diminished respect. And I don't do a lot of video game stuff, but I hear people talking about it when you can just hit reset and start over again versus learning how to solve a problem, an actual person-to-person problem. Let's talk this out. Let's talk about the problem. Instead, they just hit reset, start over.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem.
I wonder, because there's two things here. Like, we can talk about, social media has had a bad influence, or being able to text. At the same time, it's not something that's going to go away. And they can be incredible tools. Yep. The same thing can be said of anything. So, like, how do we use those as positive tools and not let them act in our detriment?
That's $1 million question, isn't it? You write a book on that one and you'll be famous. My opinion is we need to be able to balance that out with some actual interface, face-to-face problem solving, versus just the quick, easy answer stuff. I'm not a big fan of participation trophies. I think people in general need to learn, you didn't win today, so do better next time. Is there some benefit to that? Yeah, because it keeps them encouraged, and yes, it keeps them wanting to play, right? But they don't learn the downfalls of, I need to do better, because they still get a trophy. And so in law enforcement respect, I don't think they gain the respect that they should learn solving problems. They should learn by becoming a better individual, better person. But that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah. One of the things I see with social media, I go back to taking away consequences. If I spew obscenities in your face, 50 years ago, you're liable to deck me. Over the phone, you're never going to see me. So it's say whatever you want. And I think one of the problems is, and we forget this sometime in growing up, when we were babies, learning to walk. If we gave up every time we fell over and fell, we'd never learn.
Right.
But somewhere in growing up, we learned to see failure as a bad thing instead of a learning opportunity. And people don't realize that failure is the most information-rich thing that you can ever have. Every time you fail at something, you learn more than every time you succeed.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious if it's an effect of that in social media, where we've taken away the ability to fail and have consequences by way of anonymity or distance.
I 100% agree with that. I try to share with all of my kids and all my grandkids, and I'll continue as much as I can. One of my favorite words is choices, to make good choices and understand consequences to choices. One of my favorite Christian author, Max Lucado, in one of his books, he's talking about God and the angel Michael having a conversation, and they're looking down on what God had created. And the angel Michael asks him, "Why didn't you make man love you? You could have just easily made all mankind love you." And God's response was, "If I gave him the choice to love me, it would have more meaning than to just make somebody do something." So to me, the word choices, the fact that we can choose to love, the fact that we can choose to do something, knowing that there's positive things that come of it or negative things, make the choice, think about it, and make a good choice.
Yeah.
So,
there's kind of a similar concept, somewhat adjacent, that Jordan Peterson talks about. He calls it the Luciferian intellect. And what he means by that is and he says this is the original downfall of Satan. The Luciferian intellect is placing more value in your own intellect than in God or even other people around. So you think higher of yourself. And so then you can't see any consequences to your actions. You just automatically assume you're the smartest, I'm right. And that you could be the smartest person in the world, but you're tripping over your own intellect because you're refusing to see other consequences or choices. It's just, I'm right and it's my way or the highway.
Yeah. And that's a weakness.
Yeah.
I mean, they obviously see it as their strength and they're the strongest, smartest. But, man, if you want to improve, accept the fact that you're not the smartest or the strongest, and learn to gather all that information and become a better person with what you can from everybody.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Jocko Willink? He was a Navy SEAL for 20 years. And now teaches a lot of leadership classes and stuff. Him and I want to say Leif Babin wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. And they phrase, especially in terms of leadership, but generally for everyone, 100% ownership, extreme ownership. You don't ever blame anyone else. It's, I did this and the consequences, good or bad, I take ownership of that. You know, if I'm in leadership and my team member does something, I don't sit and blame them. I take ownership of that. I should have done this training, or I could have better enabled or prepared, or
even communicate better.
Yeah. And I kind of see that tying in where people don't take ownership of anything anymore. They just try and push it off. It's everyone else's fault. It's more kind of a victim mentality. And yeah, I just think it's interesting to think about. I'm still trying to find, I don't think anybody has the answer to how we use social media and all that as a tool and not lean into it. But I definitely see detriments in different areas, and I'm starting to try to map out what and why.
Well, it can be a positive tool. All of those media outlets can be a positive tool if the people would choose. And along with that, they have to make their personal choice not to be the victim. You know, they need to choose, well, this happened to me. Woe is me, I'm a victim, and put it on social media to see how much attention they can get, right? Because drama seems to drive so much today, versus the person that not driven by the drama and is willing to say, okay, well, that had some negative consequences. Maybe I should do this better or not do that again, and not make it about a media post that they're going to get whatever 100,000 hits or whatever that is. So
yeah,
I agree. It could be all the positive stuff, and the negative stuff comes out today with the whiners, the victims, and they get the attention.
They do.
Yeah.
There's a guy I follow, Gary V. He's known for using social media for marketing and other stuff and growing accounts and stuff. And one of the things he tells people is what we're lacking right now is authenticity. Everybody's putting on this show of who they are, but nobody's actually being like authentic. So he said, if you want to grow, one of the first things you do is you get your phone and say, this is what I struggle with. This is my challenges. And this is what I want to work on. And then you just post that. It's going back to that being authentic, owning your own problems, not putting it off on someone else, not creating drama just for the sake of drama, but creating that authenticity. Like, people are craving for that because we've ripped that out of everything. Everybody we see online is, and I mean, we do this to a degree in person as well, right? I'm not going to be the same exact person at work as I am going to be sitting here talking to you as I am going to be in church, because who we are is often in relationship to another person, and we all have different facets of that come out. Not to say that we're being fake or disingenuous with people, but we've taken that to an extreme with social media, where instead of just having slight changes, like maybe I can talk with you at a different level than I talk to my wife, on social media, it's we put up whatever front we think people want to see, and it has none of us left in it.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And if we bring that back to law enforcement, when I mentioned the officers have to know a little bit about religion and being a pastor, or about medical, or about psychology, all those different things, he has to be able to play the role at the time with the scenario, not necessarily changing who he is, trying to be true to himself, but he may have to kind of play that role and that character at the moment so that he can relate to and or deal with the person in that situation. When you're dealing with a lady that's really struggling mentally and she's seeing sun gods and it's all real to her, well, you may have to put in this certain character in your ability to get them to relate so that you can get them to help and get them to cooperate and go to the hospital with you, So, yeah, you got to play kind of different roles and not get away from who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think to build on that is maybe a little bit of leaning into empathy. Relationships are built on communication, and you communicate, especially at the start, on things that you have in common or connections. So you might, I've never been in law enforcement. I've been in the military, but one of the ways I can connect to you is in what I've learned to what you've learned in law enforcement, and then we find some of that common ground. So I'm kind of viewing it in that light of an officer interacting with someone. How can I know this isn't real, and I'm not going to affirm and just say, you're seeing sun gods, but how can I connect in a way that you're going to see me alongside you and have that connection to where you trust me or will walk. How do I want to say that? Where you trust me enough to cooperate and that I have your interests in mind.
Well, yeah, I'm not really sure. What comes to mind is the fact that people forget that these officers are human and they don't have all the answers. And so trust is something not easily gained in law enforcement. You are often made out to be the bad guy, or you're dealing with a bad situation. So how do you get that trust when you're wanting to give it or expect it? I'm not really, other than just being yourself and maybe being genuine, just be as genuine as you can.
Yeah. Going back to Jordan Peterson. So he spent 30 years as a clinical psychologist, and he studied evil in depth. He worked with criminals in some of the prisons and numerous other things. But one of the things he came to is, especially with someone who's unstable or who's gone through trauma, or maybe someone who's been incarcerated or something like that, the best way to interact with them, really the only way to interact with them, is 100% honesty and genuineness. Like, they can sniff out if you're being disingenuine or if you're trying to just placate them. But if you stay 100% honest, even if you're disagreeing, they have a level of respect that they're able to interact. So I would imagine there's some level of training, don't be just fake with these people.
That'll bite you in the hiney quick in law enforcement. Anything you're doing that's investigative and possibly going to go to court, you're allowed to be deceptive to some degree in order to get the person to confess or in order to get the evidence or something. But you have to remember, now you're going to go to court and you're going to talk to a jury and or a judge, and you're going to have to explain why you were being deceptive or why you weren't being honest or truthful or something. And the courts gave you some leeway, understanding you're trying to further investigation. But my philosophy was always just try to be honest, just be truthful with them, and be careful. And I did this with my family. Don't accuse your kids of doing something you don't know they did. If you come in there with a heavy hand and you think they did this, and so now they're going to get, punished for it, well, really, you don't know that it was absolutely them. Maybe there was something else involved, or it happened some other way, and now you've just damaged that relationship because you weren't being open and honest about just going and asking what happened here. And same thing when you're trying to get an individual to confess to a scene, and you say, well, I have your gloves and I have your fingerprints. Even if they did it and they didn't wear gloves, or they did wear gloves and there's no fingerprints, and now you just told them you don't have the evidence, you ruined it. And now you got to explain that to a jury.
Yeah.
So just be honest. Be truthful. It works out a lot better.
I see that extending a little bit into motivations. Don't assume negative intent. Assume positive intent most of the time, because as soon as you start like building off what you were saying about kids, don't ever blame them for something that you don't know. I think a lot of people assume intent and blame without taking the time to either question, get to know for sure, or giving a little time and waiting and seeing. And tying this into Jordan Peterson, he said, in a lot of his research, one of the things that's come out is the way he would interact with his clients when he was a psychiatrist working with the prison is intentionally put himself in a frame of mind. In what circumstances would I have to find myself to take the same action you took? Because we can't ever think of ourselves as greater than other people. I'm high and mighty and I would never do that. Like, we're all capable of terrible things.
Life happens.
Yeah. And so he always went in with that intent, like, okay, you committed this crime, but I don't have the full context. What were the circumstances, and what circumstances did they find themselves where they did that? And going in with that positive intent, like, I'm not just judging you at the offset. I'm going to be open and genuine with you. I'm going to be completely honest and truthful with you. Like, he was able to connect with them when a lot of other people couldn't get through, just from that level of respect and honesty. And he's written a couple of books, and that's one of the whole chapters he devoted. Do not tell lies. Like, it undermines the fabric of reality.
Once you lie to somebody and they know the truth, you've damaged that ability to get much further. Because now they question, from that point on, they're going to question, your integrity. They're going to question your intent. They're going to question where this is going. So, yeah, I 100% agree. It flows a lot better just being honest.
Yeah. There's one part we touched on briefly, but I wanted to delve in a little more, was how your faith impacted your journey through law enforcement.
Yeah. So for me personally, I think this was kind of a gift and a calling. I was raised in a religious family and believed in God. And so I knew that I was there for a reason, and maybe foolishly, but it worked for me. Some of those scenarios, I truly believe I got through because it was part of God's plan for me. So there were scenarios that could have ended very badly, but I believe I was there for a purpose, and I always wanted to do the right thing. It served my career well because I did the right thing. And you were talking about ownership to bad things earlier. If I did it wrong or if I was wrong, I owned it. I didn't blame anybody. And I think that's important in law enforcement because once you go down that slippery slope of blaming other people or blaming training or blaming whatever, it will damage your career. So for me, the faith part of it came with when I had to deal with, say the death notifications, some of the hard ones and stuff. I would say a little prayer in order to speak the words that would be most comforting or, to make it least damaging for the family, because there's no easy way to tell somebody those kind of scenarios. And then when I went home, I just believed in my heart I did the best I could do today. And if I didn't, then what did I learn? And I think God put that on my mind to just do the best you can do. So seemed to serve me okay for 37 years.
Yeah. Were you ever able to share your faith by nature of being in law enforcement?
I don't specifically remember any times in the public situations. I did with other officers. In fact, we had a couple officers that we were, I would say, kind of on the same level. And so we would have many early morning or late night conversations about God's plan or the Bible or specific verses. And that was a comfort, to be able to visit with another Christian about, hey, did you read this? Or, I was reading this and had an impact on what we did today, kind of thing. So yeah, it was good.
I guess one more piece I'm curious on is my church looks for security, and they make use of a lot of, former law enforcement agencies. So I'm curious, are there things that are like that a lot of law enforcement officers get involved with after they've retired or even while they're active? How else can law enforcement plug into the community in different ways?
I don't know of any programs that do that. I think for me personally, I would say that that's on an individual basis and what their interests are. You're not allowed to act in an official capacity, like carry your badge off duty and represent the department without being on duty for insurance purposes and liability reasons and stuff like that. So if they were to be there, as an example, at the church, but they weren't there in an official capacity in their uniform or undercover even, they would be there as a individual with knowledge and understanding and, the ability to see unusual things and pick up on things that maybe other people didn't. But that would be an individual interest in what he wanted to do, because you can't really send law enforcement unless they're working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I definitely didn't mean an official capacity.
Yeah, so the experience is there, and they have the knowledge to, see things, and that's kind of suspicious, or, packages or attitudes, things are escalating quickly or something. So they definitely have the experience and can go and participate and maybe even help in scenarios because they have that background. Sure.
Yeah. Talking about not in an official capacity raises a question. If you get your CPR license, if you see someone struggling, you are legally responsible to help them now, even if you're not on duty. Because I had looked into becoming a lifeguard when I was 18, and that's one of the things you're taught. So I'm curious if some of those same things apply towards law enforcement, even if you're not carrying your badge. Are you legally obligated in certain ways to respond or not respond or get involved or exclude yourself from involvement?
Yeah, I think that boils down to the department policies. And some departments really delve into that very specifically with specific wording and stuff. And then I would say most law enforcement people, employees, they have a good sense of ethics and really good morals. So when they see something going down that's serious and against the law, they will take some kind of action because ethically and morally, that's the kind of people they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won't just turn a blind eye. Oh, I'm not working, doesn't bother me, not going to affect me. Ethically and morally, they're good people and
Yeah.
will do something.
That was my assumption. I guess to clarify the question, can they get directly involved if they're not carrying their badge, or is it more call and report it so someone who is actively carrying their badge or on duty handles it?
They can, and it brings a little bit of liability because, and unfortunately, we were talking about the social media and things. People will use that against you, like the Marine that choked that person on the subway.
Yeah.
You know, he had the training and whatnot, and he certainly didn't mean to kill that guy. But same thing with an officer. He has training, and he steps in to try to keep this gentleman from killing his wife or girlfriend or whatever, or beating this little kid up. Well, then he gets made out to be a bad guy. He will do 99.9% of the time what he feels is right at the time, ethically and morally. And if he can, his department will back him, just depending on how their policies are written.
Yeah. Well, I think I've mostly run out of questions. I was curious if there's anything you wanted to talk about we didn't bring up.
You covered things really, really well, and I appreciate you allowing me to talk about family and stuff. As I told you when we were on the phone, family's been most important, and law enforcement's hard on family. And I was very blessed to have kids and wives that understood it's part of the job, and I tried not to take it home. But those incidents where, I needed to vent, I had support and I had good people. And if an officer can have understanding family, it'll get him a long ways. It'll carry him a long ways. So I appreciate you allowing me to talk about my family and my experiences.
Yeah. Well, I'll end it with just a last couple quick questions, maybe call it rapid fire. If you had to give 3 pieces of advice for an officer, law enforcement officer, in maintaining their relationship with their spouse, what would you tell them?
Talk to them. Get them to understand what you're going through. They need to be your sounding board. However, if they're struggling with it, you need to understand that as well. Maybe you need to take it back to a sergeant or somebody. And then if you guys don't be so macho to not understand, you can go get counseling, because there's counseling available out there, and almost every department or insurance company can provide you with some kind of a resource. Even if it's to go to your church. Don't be so ego-bound that you're not willing to go out and take your wife, to something to get some understanding and understand what you're putting her through and what you're going through on her behalf. I think that's huge. And then just be honest, be real, tell the truth, own it. If you made a mistake, just own it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one is, if someone was thinking of a career in law enforcement, what would you tell them to consider before making the choice?
Don't do it.
Why is that?
No, and more so today, Brenton, because the attitude of society has changed so much. We spoke of it earlier. I wasn't afraid to go anywhere or do anything because the respect that was there. And these days, they almost have to have backup almost everywhere they go. One, because somebody's probably at least videotaping them or going to confront them, or the people they're dealing with don't have any respect. So just, man, that's kind of a tough question, but learn to deal with people before you get into law enforcement, because you're going to deal with a lot of crazy situations, crazy people, crazy everything. You're going to see it all.
Yeah. I had one final question, and it's slipping my mind right this second. This one's going to be slightly different. If someone were to ask you, in what way can we best support those that are in law enforcement around us, what would that look like? Like, what are we not thinking of that we can do to best support you?
For me, that's a multi-answer type question. My first immediate response that I thought of as you were asking that question is, if people would just do what the nice officer asks them to do, things would turn out a whole lot different. Honestly, the attitudes of people and the victim attitudes today and mentality of all that stuff's got to go away. Just listen to what the officer says, do what he tells you to do. And if you have a problem with what he did, or there's avenues, there's way to address it, quit being a victim and just listen to what he says, does what he says, do what he says, and then deal with whatever if you disagree with it, either in court or by going to his supervisors. That's the biggest thing. The victim thing creates problems when people don't want to listen.
Yeah.
I had the privilege in being in management like I was. We get to see after action reports of scenarios that made multimedia scenarios. And so if it hit like a national news story and was in the news for a while, chances are in some of our administrative classes or whatever, we probably got to see the whole report, everything besides just what news flash hit. And some of those, what ended up being a victim, the officer gave the person repeated requests and the repeated commands over and over and over again before it escalated to the scenario where they got shot or died. But we got the opportunity to see the video live, repeated. Please get on there. Please get back in the car. Please show us your hands. And those kind of things weren't done. So unfortunately, it went south.
Yeah. To build on that last question, let's say you're a close friend or a spouse. What can they best do to support you that they might not realize?
An officer?
Yeah.
Treat them like human beings. They need to vent. They need to have a good time. They need to do something fun. They're not robots. Treat them like a person. Do the barbecue thing. Do the let's go fishing. Whatever their deal is, treat them like a normal human being. Yeah, let's go to church. Let's go to Bible study.
Yeah, back to what you said earlier. Treat them how you would want to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like I said, we had some classes for spouses as well, because it's hard on the officer, but she wasn't even there, and now she's got to deal with it, or he has to deal with it, at home, and they don't understand all the time either. So, include the spouses so that at least they have an understanding.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all the questions I had.
Great. How do we do time-wise?
I think we did good.
No, I didn't think you'd be able to keep me in here very long.
I think we stayed longer than you thought.
Yes.